Hey guys, Jackie at Cruising the Sierra Farm. So things are a little different today. As you can see, I haven't really gotten my day started because I'm still in my jammies. But it's comfortable and it's overcast and cold outside, and I was just feeling jammy like. Anyway, so today's video is a little different, but it is something that I really wanted to take the time to do before the moment is lost. And that's kind of exactly the reason that I'm doing the video. So, I want to explain my day yesterday. So, my husband was getting ready to take my truck and go to some meetings. So, I needed to get some errands done in town and anything that I needed to get done before he takes my truck. So I had to go to the post office, and I had to drop by the feed store, and I had told my in-laws that I would bring them by some sourdough English muffins that I had made. And so I reached out to them. They were home, and so I stopped by with them and, of course, sat down to visit. Now, I absolutely enjoy my time with my in-laws. They've been my rock through um, a lot of things in life, and super supportive in my life as well as my children's lives. They are the grandparents that were there at every sporting event, school event. Um, I think they may have missed like maybe one. They were always there, super supportive, still are. Um, anyway, I've developed a serious closeness to them, especially over the past few years. And I love going and spending time with them. And I had lots of stuff to do at the house yesterday, but I ended up, I think I got to my in-laws around 10:30ish. I didn't get home till 3:30. I was there a long time. But it was so, I always leave there so refreshed, and just, I feel like my heart is always full every time I leave there. Um, so, of course, how things normally go when I visit, um, my father-in-law always asks how, each one of the kids are doing and what's happening new in their lives. Um, and then always asks how are things out at the farm, how is Jess? Oh, by the way, our puppy that's right there, he is actually named after my father-in-law. My father-in-law's name is Jess. And we decided to name our sweet boy Jess. Anyway, so he asked how Jess is doing, and it's so funny because when they come over to visit, if Jess is doing something wrong and his name gets hollered, my father-in-law is like, "What did I do?" So anyway, we went through the normal, um, gave him updates on everybody, um, and then he asked how things were out here and if I'd gotten done with all of the harvesting and stuff. And we just got to talking about life here on the farm and my goals here and what my new goals are. And I've told him about kind of where I'm at and what I'd like to see happen next here. And he said something to me that just really made me stop in my tracks. And he said, listening to you and all that you're saying, and how you're explaining things takes me back to my childhood. And I was like, wow, what a gift. What a gift for somebody to jog your memory back to now. He's 83 years old. What an awesome experience to be shifted back to your childhood and have fond memories that correlate with your grandmother and the things he remembers doing with his grandmother, or simply his grandmother and grandfather doing. He lives on the property that his grandparents had and raised him on. And so it was so interesting to hear him say, my grandmother, and then he would motion with his hand out the sliding glass door, pointing in the direction of where she kept the chickens and the turkeys. They had turkeys, and they had sheep, and they had pigs, I think he said. They didn't have any cows at that time, though. And there's a beautiful picture done by a local artist, a painting done by a local artist hanging in their house of what it looked like back then. And it's so beautiful, and it really, I really looked at it for the first time. I mean, I've seen it multiple times in my 31 years of marriage to my husband, but I truly saw it for the first time, and it actually took me back. I wanted to place myself in that era because I'm so... If you've been following my channel, you see how I try to... everything has a reason here. Everything has a purpose. There's no waste. Want not, waste not. That comes from many years ago. I want to say during the Depression. Want not, waste not. They didn't have the ability to waste things back then. And, it just truly brought me back full circle to why I'm doing what I'm doing and why I'm sharing what I'm sharing. And one of the things that I was thinking about was, I feel so strongly about people getting back to the basics and getting back to the way that it was done years ago and letting Mother Earth do the work for us. Mother Earth has so much to give if we allow her to. And I love... what they did was they grew their food, they raised their food, they ate off the land, they learned how to preserve from their ancestors, they, put up enough food to get them through the winter. That's what they did. That's what they had to do. They had to do these things to survive, right? Why aren't we still doing that? Why are we relying on other people to feed us and take care of us? And honestly, are they really even doing that? I love bringing it back to the basics of cooking from scratch. I love going back to the basics of baking your own bread. But it was so interesting to... He became a little kid again. And he talked about how he remembers his grandmother asking him to go in I'm not sure what they called it back then, but basically, so it wasn't, I guess you could consider it a root cellar, because that's where they would put the potatoes, the carrots, the root vegetables, could stay underground. And then I guess it went down into the land on his property. There were steps that went down there, but then there was doors that covered it up, kept the, animals and whatever out. And And he would have to go in there, and he was talking. I mean, it brought him all the way back to, he remembers the snakes. The snakes would, they really enjoyed that area and down in there. And something about his grandfather and the gopher snakes and the water snakes that would come from the creek that was right there. And I said to him, I said, "Oh my goodness, where is that? I mean, I've been in your normal cellar because they have a right off of the house, is where his grandmother would keep all of her canned things that she would preserve." And he says to me, "Oh, I filled it in years ago." And I was like, "You did what?" I could not believe he filled it in. I would give anything to have a root cellar right now. And I told him about a location on the property that I'd love to be able to do that with. Oh my goodness. So, it got us to talking about him going out and retrieving stuff out of there for meals and whatever. And then he was telling me, he says, "I sure wish that I would have paid attention or had the desire to pay attention and learn from my grandmother," because he was explaining to me that a generation was skipped. His mother learning everything from her mother was skipped, and so it was left up to him to learn those things, and unfortunately he took those for granted. He recognizes that, but he wishes that he would have paid more attention. But it's so lovely to hear that, talking to him about what my plans are out here, what I'm currently doing, it just really takes him back to that childhood. And, he talked about how his grandfather had a couple horses, and they plowed and disked the fields for where they grew corn initially, which they would put away for the animals. And I mean, like, he could tell you the horses' names. I can't even remember. He said it so fast. I was so intent on listening to him. I'll have to ask him again what the name of the horses were. But, they had a little wagon, and they'd load it all up. And just talking to him about how his grandmother would feed the animals, and that there was no buying commercial feed back then. They grazed, and then you put away for the food for them for winter. And how the chickens would do their thing, and just the whole thing. And then I would share with him different videos that I've watched on YouTube that have enriched my learning. And it was really, I love this more than anything. I love to talk to elderly people and learn about back when they were children, what their parents did, how they did things, how they survived the Depression, how they survived through the, what was it called? The food rationing during World War II, the food rationing. Wow. After having that talk, I decided to go do a little bit of research and learning a little bit more about that time and some of the food that got them through the Depression. And, you had a little booklet, and you were allowed so many rations for this, that, and the other. And it's crazy because that wasn't just United States. That was like worldwide. They were rationing during the war so greatly. In fact, I want to say that I read that Britain's rationing lasted something like over a decade. Even though the war was done, they kept the food rationing going. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the government being able to tell you you can only have this much food, and then try to figure out how you're going to survive knowing that, and only having that? And so it, I just, I just ate up all of the information. Um, and I think that more people really truly need to do that and sit and have those talks with the elderly, because when they're gone, so is that information. And I feel so strongly about that, because especially with the way that the world currently is, I absolutely could see another food rationing happening. And I think we could learn so much from our elderly in our lives. And it would really be beneficial for everyone to take that time to listen to our ancestors and to understand the hardships, share the recipes. I would give anything to have recipes from back then. I would love to have a cookbook from that era. I was reading something when I was looking up about the Great Depression and the rationing of food. And I guess the way that they kept, like if the wife were to, or grandmother or whoever were to bake a cake, and they cut into that cake and then it exposed the sides of that cake and then that cake was going to dry out, they would preserve the moistness of that cake by taking 2 slices of bread and sticking toothpicks into the bread into the cake, so it sealed up those closed ends. I was like, genius. Like, I wouldn't have thought to do that. you know um, I don't know, maybe now I would have grabbed a piece of cardboard or something if I didn't have, cellophane or foil or wax paper or parchment paper. I mean, I don't know. What would you do, And they had to learn how to survive in those times and what works. But interesting, the things that were rationed, and I think it would be pretty close to some of the things that would be rationed in today's day and age if it came down to that. Uh, um, the ones off the top of my head were dairy products and gasoline. Um, I'd have to go back and have it sitting right in front of me to be able to relay it to you guys. But I mean, you can find it on your own. Google the Great Depression or Google food rations in World War II, and it'll take you. I mean, it's really interesting. It really truly is. And I guess that brings it all back full circle in, the desires that I have here on my property. And with that, if you've been following me, you've heard me say this multiple times, but one of the things that I said to my husband is we need to make our acre work for us. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I enjoy it. I'm passionate about it. I love being able to, let me show you something. This is November, what is it? Oh, it's my dad's birthday today. It's November 16th. But look at this. I still have fresh tomatoes from my garden, and it's November 16th. These are all of the green tomatoes that I picked at the very end of the season before we got frost in October. And yeah, it's great. I've been able to eat, my microgreens are growing here. Tomatoes with microgreens on them. Ooh, so good. Anyway, making this acre work for us. And my next endeavor, and I'm going to have to do a lot of work on it, He loves to play with my nursery pots. Anyway, my next thing is that dairy cow, and I've been working on it. And it's not just going to be, I have done my research, and just as the chickens that I raise here are dual purpose for meat and eggs. We keep our pullets and our hens for eggs, and we use the cockerels and the roosters for meat and for breeding. We do all of our own breeding. We do not buy new chicks every year like a lot of people do. We are self-sufficient in that here. That's what I want to do with my cow. So my cow, we will be getting, at some point, I have a lot of work to build up to it, a Dexter cow that will provide excellent beef as well as milk. So anyway, I just wanted to share that to you because I feel so strongly about, well, without getting political here, you know, this whole the whole mess that's been going on over the past 3 years, and, you know, our history being erased right in front of our very eyes. You know, pulling down statues and removing good books, banning Dr. Seuss because of whatever, but yet explicit materials available for our children. Times are really strange, and they are removing so much of our nation's history and our world's history as that goes. And when it comes to not only that happening, but then we don't take the time to sit and listen, like really listen and absorb the history of our ancestors before they're gone. We're going to lose so much information that won't be able to be passed along for our future generations. I hope with everything in me that the information that I can give to others can be passed down. And again, back to the phrase of each one teach one. I think I've mentioned that in another video. If you don't know about that phrase, Google it and look it up. Each one teach one. I will explain a little bit here if you don't have the ability to go look it up. Each one teach one goes back to the slavery days. They like to keep their slaves ignorant and not educated, but in a rare circumstance, they would educate one, or at least teach one certain things. How to read, for instance, let's just say. So instead of all blacks and all slaves being able to go learn, that one got learned, and he or she went back and taught it to the rest. So each one teach one. If I learn something new, I'm going to share it with you. I'm not going to keep it to myself, considering that's history. The ways of our ancestors were successful in many ways. I can't even imagine, like, if something were to drastically happen in this world, how many people would be left not knowing how to survive? That's a scary thought. That is a scary thought. How many would not know how to grow a garden or provide for themselves and raise chickens and be able to butcher them and preserve them in whatever means they have. What a shame. What a shame. And one of the things that makes me so super sad is the fact that I didn't become learned on any of this until, well, some. My mom did a little bit of canning and preserving, I think, or most of it might have been, honestly, I don't recall. Most of it might have just been fresh from the garden. I don't know if a lot of it was preserved or not. That makes me sad that I don't recall that. I do recall my mom gardening and having to weed, and I hated weeding, and probably why I didn't really get too into growing food until I was married, with kids on the way or young kids, and then things just became more about the kids, and we were, traveling to make their goals and dreams come true as best we could. And interestingly enough, let me say this, the one good thing that came out of COVID, it's the one good thing that's come out of COVID is that it has taught me to be more self-sufficient for me and my family, and to hopefully someday have children that will want to learn those same things and teach it to their children. And that might not happen, and it might. If anyone will take anything away from what I do, it'll be my youngest, because he was home for a lot of, gardening and growing, and he seems to be have followed along more with what I'm doing. Anyway, so yeah, I have a lot to say. I could probably sit here for hours and talk about this topic, but I was meant to share my day yesterday with you guys. I think it's important. I think that I would love, and I told him, I said, I would love nothing more than to be able to videotape you speaking of your childhood and the things you remember from your grandmother and your grandfather, because those are valuable things and history that will be lost when he parts this world. And that would be tragic. And of course he says, he doesn't want to be in front of a camera. And then, but it made him pause, and he said, my grandmother would have said the same thing, that she didn't want to say it in front of others, but she would have known also that history matters and that it needs to be taught. And so, who knows? Maybe I'll be able to convince him to do that. Even for my kids to be able to hear, and get a little piece of the history straight from his mouth, and it not just being stories told once he's gone, So talk to your elderly people in your life, and maybe even not ones in your life. Maybe go down to a senior citizen center and donate your time and sit and talk with an elderly person there and ask about their childhood and how they were raised and how they did things to survive and grow their food. And I know, before I go, one of the things that he had said was, so they love to drive all over town. It's something that they enjoy doing, and, you know, seeing the change happening. And sometimes it's hard and sometimes it's, you know, welcomed. But one of the things that he said was, you know, when they drive around, or let's say when they used to drive around, when, you know, he had a job and was working his full-time job at the telephone company, and he would see so many people, so many yards growing food. You could see the rows of corn stalks, and you could see the tomatoes in the yard, and it was like they were everywhere. People were growing their own food everywhere. And he says now it's not so much. He remembers a location down on the east side of town that it was a corner lot, and the people who lived there or next door to that lot, that empty lot, were raising their own food and growing their own gardens. It's what people did. And now there's a 2-story house built on that property, and it no longer provides food. And so he says, I wonder why that is, that we don't see that anymore. And my mother-in-law said it perfectly. She says, those older people have died. They've died, and the generations below them didn't grow up in a time of the Depression, in a time of food being scarce, in a time of food being rationed and only being able to have so much food. And that just made me so super sad to say she's right on point. Our older generations are dying, and their ways of life prior to everything being so modernized now is gone. How tragic. I had to take the time to go talk to somebody that has dealt with that. I think we would all be rich in knowledge if we took the time. Love y'all. Till the next video. One of the last things that I want to leave with you in this video is the text that I sent to my father-in-law once I got home.